Hello, and welcome to another episode of 5 Minute Mythologies. We're drinking some delicious Rheingeist Truth today, and it happens to be March, which is Women's History Month, which brings us to the subject of today's episode, the mysteries and theories surrounding the disappearance of the infamous Amelia Earhart. So we all know who Amelia Earhart is, or was. She was the first woman to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. She set and broke many records when it came to early aviation. She promoted commercial air travel. She was a founding member of the 99s, which is an organization dedicated to promoting female pilots. She led a very fascinating life and was one of the leading female icons of the early 20th century. However, we're not really here to talk about her life. As always, we're here to talk about the mysterious circumstances surrounding her disappearance and the theories which came from that disappearance, and the mystery which has persisted for the last 80 plus years as to what happened to her during her around the world trip. So let's get into it. As we all know, in 1937 she was planning this round the world trip. On June 1st, 1937, they took off from Miami. They made numerous stops in South America, went over to Africa, the Indian subcontinent, landing in Southeast Asia. They arrive at Lae, New Guinea on June 29th, 1937, and they're getting ready for their next leg in this trip, which would be to Howland Island, which is this little nothing spit of land in the middle of the South Pacific. It's one of those things where if you blink, you miss it. It's basically a glorified airstrip and nothing else. And they have to land on this little spit of land because that's where they're going to refuel to make that next leg over to Hawaii. However, as we all know, the plane never actually makes it to Howland Island. Now, this could be for several reasons. It could have been a navigation error, which threw them off course. There was also heavy clouds in the area, which could have obstructed their view of the island. They were also not really familiar with the radio they were using. While the Coast Guard cutter that was in the area could hear her, it doesn't seem like they could receive any transmissions that were being sent to them. So naturally, this plane disappears in the middle of the South Pacific Ocean. There's this huge search for her and it yields nothing, and 2 years later they legally declare her and her navigator Fred Noonan to be deceased. One theory being the Gardner Island crash theory, where they actually, instead of trying to find Howland Island, they turned south towards Gardner Island, crashed probably slightly offshore, made it to the island, and lived out the rest of their lives as castaways on that island. However, without having a lot of natural resources, it would have been a short-lived life. And while they did find contemporary skeletal remains and evidence of a contemporary, maybe castaway settlement there later, post-World War II, they were never able to confirm that this came from Earhart or Noonan. More likely, it was from some kind of castaway situation during World War II. However, that evidence is circumstantial, so we really don't know what it is. They found a sextant and they found skeletal remains. It's really all they found. Evidence of some fires and some people eating turtles and stuff, but it could have been lost soldiers during World War II for all we know. Another popular hypothesis was that they were spies for the US and their actual mission was to report on Japanese goings-on in the South Pacific at this time, and they were actually captured by the Japanese, either gunned down or forced down somehow. Either way, in this story, they're captured and they're taken to Saipan, and even the Lockheed Electra is taken to Saipan, and they say eventually Fred Noonan is assassinated, and eventually after that, Amelia Earhart has two different stories. Some claim that she became the famous Tokyo Rose. Others claim that they actually witnessed her being knelt down near a ditch by the side of a road and being executed as a spy. It is also said that some military personnel who were, I guess, POWs of the Japanese during World War II were actually made to set fire to a hangar which contained the DC Electra itself. However, others say that the Japanese cut it up for scrap and tossed it into the ocean. However, the overall prevailing hypothesis is the one that's actually true. The crash and sink theory. They believe that the plane crashed somewhere near Howland Island and sank along with Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan, and that to this day it's still laying on the ocean floor waiting to be found. And sadly, yeah, as always, the most logical explanation is probably the one that actually happened. But whenever you have the mysterious disappearance of an ultra celebrity, it's always going to kick off these rumors about what could have possibly happened. I think it's a real American thing because we can't just accept that an American hero would just go out like nothing. No. In America, our heroes always persevere. We scrape to some island somewhere in the South Pacific, or we get captured by the Japanese and we scrape out into survival until, we're executed as a spy or something. Americans are rebellious. We're pretty much defiant to the end. So to think that, yeah, maybe she was captured and defiant to the end and was, executed as a spy, while fantasy, it's actually a more fitting story to an American than, oh, they just crashed in the Pacific and that was that. But that's just something that's just kind of ingrained in our culture. We Americans, we have to take everything to its most logical extreme, and we love a good story. But despite all the fantasy and rumor and myth, her legacy that of her life actually still lives on today with organizations like the 99s and all these programs that promote women in science and, women in all these different industries that during her time, she lived during a time when women still didn't have the right to vote, until she was an adult. So it says a lot about her legacy as a feminine icon. She's still a legacy today. And someday, yeah, we are going to find that Electra on the bottom of the ocean, and that will conclude the story. However, until then, it is kind of fun to think about the fact that, yeah, she may have been a spy for the U.S., or she may have made it to Gardner Island and scraped out a meager existence until the end. And I may revisit her story in a future episode just to expand on some things, because her legacy really is an epic story of what it means to be an American who came from a somewhat average background, who went on to do great things. But on that note, I think I'm going to end it there. This episode is running a little long. And as always, if you like what I do, all I ask is that you maybe share it with a friend. This show mostly does grow by word of mouth, and any help on that front would be appreciated. And as always, tune in every Tuesdays for 5-Minute Mythologies and every other Thursdays for Urban Legends and Conspiracies. Once again, this is Mike, and I thank you for listening.